Good afternoon, everyone. Country Flyboy here, and today, probably the last, if not the next to last video of the Airport Design Editor series. And now I'm going to be giving you a few things. One, I'm going to be showing you an extra trick that you can do with Airport Design Editor. Two, I'm going to be giving you some tips. And three, I'm going to be showing you things not to do with Airport Design Editor. I'm going to have to bring up a few sceneries from the Freeware crowd. I won't be mentioning names, but some of these sceneries have done things that, just no. So, anywho, what's one extra thing you can do with Airport Design Editor? Well, this here is Daytona Beach International Airport, and it's the AFCAD from Aerosoft's I don't know when they released it, but it's from Aerosoft's add-on scenery for Daytona Beach International and the surrounding area. What you can do is actually edit the AFCADs of payware scenery airports. Now, this will not alter textures and whatever. The way payware sceneries work is they have a custom texture that overlays the AFCAD, and that is what you see. But the underlying AFCAD, where the parking spots, the taxiways, the runways, the approaches, all that fun stuff is part of the AFCAD. So what you can do is you can actually edit that to add more parking spaces. You can edit taxiway designations. Runway numbers can be edited. You just won't be able to change the number on the custom texture. Stuff like that. So I did a review for this airport, and it may or may not be up before this video, but this was Airport Design Editor's Daytona Beach International, and the AFCAD for it was crap. And for payware scenery, I was astonished at how bad the AFCAD actually was. By the way, payware scenery developers, some of the most stupid stuff I have seen has actually come from them. And the freeware crowd tends to be better at this. I don't know why. Seeing as you're paying money for stuff, you would think you would be getting better quality. Well, the things that bother me were, one, there was not enough parking spaces. And by that, I mean there were 10 parking spaces total. There were the 6 over here gates, and then there were 10 additional parking spaces. A few over here, a few over here, and a few over here. Nowhere near enough. This is actually a decently busy airport, even with default AI traffic. Nowhere near enough parking spots. So yeah, that was one thing I fixed. I also edited the parking spot names so that I knew exactly where they were on the airport. I added more parking spots. I added more taxiways, because there actually is a taxiway that runs here there's some hangars here and some edge stuff here, but there's a taxiway that runs along through here that you can taxi across, and they didn't have that in the AFCAD for whatever reason. Also, the thing that ticked me off the most was they didn't update the approaches. Daytona Beach has seen a lot of changes to its navigation data since the default flight simulator compile of the nav data. And one thing they did not do, which ticked me off, was they did not update the approaches. And that's really easy to do. It's so easy, I was shocked that they didn't do it. So, basically, let's bring up the Ormond Beach transition for the ILS 7 left. Now, by default, the 2006 approach was you start in Ormond Beach, you fly to this NDB, and you do a hold in lieu of a procedure turn, then you fly inbound. That was the old one. The new one, the current one, at a time of recording, was Ormond Beach VOR, this radial to this waypoint, a DME arc to this waypoint, and then fly the localizer inbound. They didn't update it. They just imported the default approaches. And that was a bit shocking for me, because I had made my own custom AFCAD for Daytona Beach, since it's an area I fly to quite a bit in Flight Simulator, that had the updated approaches. So I had to go into a payware sceneries AFCAD and fix several problems that it had that we'll go over later. One thing, it had this huge concrete polygon around the airport, like that, and I don't know why that was there. That was pointless. At first I thought it was just so they were lazy and just put a big concrete apron around it so they didn't have to draw individual taxiways. And since that was going to be overlaid with an image anyway, it didn't matter. I deleted it and found they actually did draw the taxiways using the apron tool for some reason, but Yeah, they did it the hard way. That doesn't make much sense, does it? You don't... Yeah, payware scenery designers do stuff that just don't make much sense sometimes. They did this the hard way, but anywho, that's what they did. So yeah, you can edit payware sceneries with this. You can't really edit the image itself unless you know how. That would require decompiling a specific BGL file, making the edits in an image editor, and then recompiling it. That's way beyond the scope of this, and just, I don't even bother with that personally. Editing the AFCADs to change a taxiway name or add more parking spots, that's pretty simple. Let's go to a few airports I've done over the years. Alright, so I brought up Hilton Head, which I released several months ago as part of a 3-airport package for the Savannah area, and this was basically rebuilt from the ground up, default, and this is how it looks in the Airport Design Editor when I've opened up the saved file. So this is what an airport is going to look like when you get done if you've placed custom lighting and whatnot, minus the black squares. Now, let's say you've opened up an airport that you've downloaded from the internet. You want to make some edits to it. Maybe it needs to be updated or whatever. Maybe it's an FS9 airport that you want to bring into FSX. That's something you can do with ADE. So here we have Hilton Head Island Airport, and we need to fix these black square problems. Now, these black squares indicate that there is a library object placed there that you do not have in your library object manager as a file for your ADE to use. So one way we can fix this is we can open up the library object manager, go to add file, which I've already got the file location here. This is the file I'm looking for, 10 objects, one already in database, it's fine. I'm going to be deleting these anyway. Save, and voila. It's not going to fix it right away, but what we can do is reopen the airport, which I already have the save file here. Boom diada. So this is what it looks like when you place custom lighting. Now also, with this airport, I used the GP Objects tool. I didn't completely build the airport with GP Objects. I instead used the GP Objects to accent and add things that you can't really do with default light lines and whatnot. So this is what one looks like, and that's another thing you can do is you can make edits to other people's airports, bring them up to date, and you can keep third-party sceneries from both freeware, payware, and even your own up to date, or you can update default airports this way. Very, very useful trick, and really you don't even need to make edits. Like if you wanted to simply just add a parking space, we'll add let's add another gate over here at terminal. There are only 2 there in real life. Let's say we wanted to add 3. We'll put one there. We'll bring this down a bit. We'll align it the way we want. We'll set that right there. And then we'll just add it to the taxiway network by putting this here and that there. And boom, we're done. We've just added another parking spot. We can rename it. It's auto-named it to Gate 3 because that's what it is. But, yep, just like that. Really simple. We can edit taxi signs. Everything that you can do when building an airport, you can do to edit it to bring it up to current standards. On to the next airport. Alright, so here I have brought up the default Waycross Ware County Airport, Waycross, Georgia. And this is an airport that's seen a lot of changes since the compile of the default navigation data with FSX. Notably, this taxiway here is not there anymore. And by the way, I want to show you this. This is what the runway boundary is for. When you have a runway leading into a taxiway like this, instead of coming off of the side, this is where you would put a runway boundary sign. Like that. And you would have it face towards the runway. So airplanes coming off of the runway would see this sign. And they'd see the runway boundary. Airplanes coming off of the taxiway onto the runway would see the standard taxiway runway sign. Oops. 3. Oop, God damn it. 1, 3. Like that. That's what they would see. And one useful tip, if you zoom in really close to these taxiway signs, you can actually place them right on top of one another, just like that. Just make sure you have one not quite overlapping it like that, but just right half and half right there, and it will look like one taxiway sign with just something different printed on each side. That's a useful tip. So that's what the runway boundary is for. So let's say we didn't want to do any major edits. We just wanted to make this match up to current charts. Well, that's real simple. We get rid of this taxiway here. It's gone, just like that. And we need to lengthen this runway because this is the older one where it was 5,200 by 150. And if we look at the AFD, it's actually it's 5,992 by 100 now. So we will decrease this to 100, 5,992, and it's going to lengthen it on both sides. We're just going to move it down a bit so that it's right about there. That's about where it was at first. We'll move it down just a little bit more. Yeah, that's about where it was, where the threshold and the numbers were before we edited it. Now we will also have to edit the runway link here to make it 100 feet wide instead of 100. Otherwise you get this weird thing going on here where you have pavement going off and then nothing. I'm just going to Control C and we'll Control V the rest of it. And just like that, we have made it long enough. And if we look at the little airport sketch in the AFD, we can see there is a taxiway that goes all the way to the end. So this is an uncontrolled airport. We don't have to worry about taxiway names. We'll just draw this, and we'll put this one to here. We'll drag this one out to right there. Yep. And we'll put a hold short one there. And just like that, we've brought the runway up to match the current charts, or at least the length and dimensions. It won't match up entirely with the real world, but we have brought the airport up to its current dimensions at least. Also, I want to show you this. This is runway 18 and 36, but there's a NOTAM for this airport that was put out recently. This one right here. Waycross runway 1836 changed to 119, and it's a permanent NOTAM, meaning this, they just haven't came out. This is now runway 1 and 19. So any reference to this airport via approaches or nav data or whatever, if you see 18 and 36, think 19 and 1. Now, in real life, they haven't had the paint crews come out here and repaint the runway yet because, well, they have to close the runway and it takes a couple days to actually do it because they have to. In real life, when they renumber a runway, they have to close down the runway, or at least the first half part of it. Like, they'd have to close down everything past that, and they would have to come sandblast the paint off of the runway and then put it on there. They don't just paint over it. They have to sandblast it. So, we can make that simple change really quickly without having to go sandblast some concrete. Simply by changing the primary number, we see it's 18, which got changed to 19, and it will change to runway 1. Boom, we're done. Just like that. Except not. Now we need to go to approach mode, and we need to load up the default approaches, which you can see are still going to reference the old runways. So what we're going to do is, and it's going to draw the approach really weird like that. We're going to change the runway number here, and we're going to manually type it to 19. Then hit enter. And that will change the reference to 19. We also need to change the final leg that goes straight to the runway to 19 as well. And boom, we just fixed the approach. And we do that for each approach there is. See, there is a GPS runway 1 or 36 as well. You can see it's fracked up. All right, so we change this to runway 1, which is at top. And we change the leg that goes to the runway to runway 1. Or it's actually, you gotta type 01. Forgot. There we go. Boom, we just changed the approach. The approach itself is still the same. We didn't have to mess with any of the data. We just had to make one simple edit like that. Change a number. That's it. And that's how you can bring a default airport up to modern standards in less than 5 minutes. Really. It took no time at all. You can also make changes to radio frequencies to, I don't know if they changed at all. Let's see. I think the CTAF might change. 122.8. No, that's the same. Let's just pretend that there was a NOTAM for the CTAF frequency to change at this airport. Instead of 122.8, it was going to be 123.5. So we can double-click CTAF, and right here in this dialog, we can change it 123.5. Boom. We just changed the CTAF frequency. Flight Sim will recognize it all the same. Yep. And when ATC tells you switch to advisory on 123.5, there you go. Just changed it. So that is a quick and easy way to bring a default airport up to a modern setting in less than 5 minutes. Took no time at all. So yep, that is how you can keep airports up to date. It's really, really simple. Mind-blowingly simple. On to the next one. Alright, so another thing I want to show, and why I kept hammering home the point of don't try to get things to match up the satellite image entirely. Feel free to take some creative license as necessary. Here's what happens when you are crazed and try to get it to match the satellite image entirely. This here, where these two runways converge and you got a taxiway across them, this is all kinds of terrible in this scenery. I actually made this scenery, by the way. This isn't a third-party one. So what I should do is I'm actually going to delete that. I'm going to draw a taxiway, just connect it up here, and I'm going to make sure it is a blank taxiway with no edge lights, and actually I'm going to kill the center line as well. I'm going to kill the center line here, and then I'm going to use another taxiway, just connect that right there. Same thing, we're going to come here, we're going to kill the center line, kill the edge lines, the lights, width that I don't care about. That is 100 times better. It looks way neater, and it functions way better, because what we had before was confusing to both user airplane and the AI airplanes as well. It can be very confusing for them. They don't like it. But what we've done here is we've made it nice and simple. This can work with. AI is not going to be using this runway anyway, because in order for AI to make use of a runway, there needs to be a hold short near the edge of the runway, or near the end of it, that they can use. And since there's this one here, but all the parking spots are on this side of the airport, that's why they don't make use of this runway at this airport here. At least not in Flight Sim, because when they request taxi, they're going to get sent to either this runway, depending on the winds, or this one over here. And yeah, that's why they don't use it. You can request it, maybe, but yeah, you could come up to this line and you'd never be cleared for takeoff. Even though in real life, that's the whole short line for this runway as well. But you might be thinking, we don't have center lines now. How are we going to know when to turn? Well, we can use our GP object tool. I'm going to add a helper shape. These things are really useful, by the way. I'm going to add an arc. I'm going to make it a 150-foot diameter arc. And I'm going to make it a full 90 degrees. So a complete reverse course change here. I'm going to line it up with the runway, and I'm going to set it to right there. Now I'm going to place it right where I need it to be. Right where I need it. Right here. And you may have already figured out what I'm planning. We're actually going to use the GP object tool to draw a new set of lines. So we've set that arc. I'm going to make a copy. I'm going to paste it here, and we're going to do the other thing. So coming off of the runway from this direction, trying to line it up as best I can. We'll just put that right there. I'm going to paste another one. And it's going to be coming off of the runway from this direction. Now this one we're going to have to play with a bit. We're just going to move it up just below that taxi line there, and then I'm going to play with the degrees to get it right where I want and realize that that's not 100% where it should be. So we'll move it right here. So we'll reduce it just a little bit more. One more turn. There we go. And we'll just line that up right there. And there's probably not any taxiway lines coming off of this runway to bring you onto this one or to this taxiway, because it makes no sense. If you're exiting the runway, you're going to want to exit to coming this way. You're going to want to exit to the left. And it's entirely possible there's one coming off of here to here, though. But we're going to make one more. We're not going to draw ones coming off of this way onto that way. We're going to make one more. We're going to reduce the degrees of the arc some so we can see where it's at. And we're going to place this one here. And I'm going to play with the degrees of the arc to get it going onto that other runway. One more. There we go. Just like that. Now there's two ways we can do this. First thing, I'm going to draw a couple of guidelines. Starting on that vertex right there, or that node, and make it way longer than I need it. And here, way longer than I need it. And here, I'm actually going to make this one, I'm going to line this one up on the runway itself. And then I'm going to get rid of parking and taxiways so I can see the underlying pavement markings. This one right here. And we're going to reline up all of our stuff. Just make sure it's all overlying one another like it should. Make sure you grab the arc, not the runway. There we go. Now we got two ways we can go about doing this. The first way is we can right-click the arc. We can select the arc, then right-click it, and then down here we have a Make Custom Ground Line. We'll click that. It'll bring up the Custom Ground Line dialog. I want it to be, for taxiway center lines, 1 foot width. Parking lines, want it to be a single yellow. You could also use taxiway marks, which make use of the default taxiway marking, which will change depending on if the user has changed that particular texture file. That texture file doesn't come with ADE, by the way. That's part of the airport itself. That's part of Flight Sim itself. Personally, I like using the one that came with it, just using single yellow. It looks better. Now, if you want it to have a backing where they paint that black border on the runway, we're going to give it a 1.5 foot width from the center. That's the center. It's going to be poking out about 3 inches either side of this. So with 1 foot, we have 1.5. It's going to poke out. Actually, I should make that 0.6, shouldn't I? It's going to poke out about 3 inches either side of the center line. And we'll give it the line base texture. You can give it any one of these textures. You can make it white, red, gravel, dirt, concrete, medium asphalt, dark, or just the line base, which is black paint, essentially. Maybe that rubberized, or it's either black paint or it's that rubber filling that they use to fill in cracks. And we can now delete that helper shape because we got that arc there. The second way we can do it is draw the arc manually, which I'm going to do here. I'm going to start on this node. I'm going to come down right to here. I'm going to put one here and here, and put another one right on this node. Now this is going to be our line that lets you cross the runway. If you're not going on the runway, you're just crossing it to get from one taxiway to the other. Also, I'm going to reselect it. And I'm going to smooth that out by moving that vertex there. So it's a nice arc instead of a straight turn. And I can also, now doing that, I can draw the rest of these with the right click method, but I'm going to get rid of that. Let's say I didn't draw that first. Let's say I didn't want to have that. So now I got my taxi line from here, but it stops right here. I'm going to fill in, I'm going to right click method these real quick, and I'm not going to use a line base. I'm just going to give it a single line. Custom ground line, 1 pattern, single yellow, done. I'm going to kill these two, so don't need them anymore. I still need to have a line that extends from here to down to connect up with these two. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it manually, and when I come to this arc here, and then I'm going to draw it manually here instead of right-clicking, because the reason I'm doing this is when I get to here, I'm actually going to go all the way up to this node, just like that. Patterns, single yellow, done. And I'm going to kill the backing on this one as well so it matches the rest. Now I'm going to move this node out the way. And you can see, and kill these guides too. Where are you at? There we go. And you can see we have custom drawn our own lines. So that would look nice and pretty in our airport scenery. So that's another thing you can do. That's another useful trick from me to you. And another thing I want to mention while we're here at Valdosta is parking spaces that are reversed. Now I did it here because I wanted to, and I led in here by skipping a parking spot so airplanes have a way to get behind it and then into these parking spots. You don't want to have this situation going on. This is a common mistake I see, and you don't want to do this because, one, it doesn't matter. Planes will spawn in this parking spot facing the right direction, but if they have to taxi to this parking spot, they're going to park in it facing the wrong direction. And this is going to mess with the parking drawings as well, and it's going to frack with GSX if you're using that. Now, GSX does not like parking spots like this, so it's almost always better if you're going to have a reverse parking spot like that to do this method here where you skip one so you can draw in. Also, let's look at some through parking spaces. Do I have any airports with that? Cross City. Let's just load up Cross City. It's the one I did recently. So here's Cross City, and you can see we have through, well, they're kind of through parking spots. If I wanted to make these through parking spots, i.e. the plane can just taxi straight ahead instead of having to push back and have it work with AI planes where AI planes will taxi straight ahead, that's all I got to do. I'm going to kill the line real quick so it matches the rest. But just like that, I've made a through parking spot. However, this is problematic. If you're using GSX, it's going to put a pushback truck and all of those sorts of stuff here anyway, so that doesn't matter. I don't do this really because as the user, I can just taxi straight ahead. I'm smart enough to know it. This will work with AI, but AI always push back from a parking spot first anyway. So that's how you do a through parking spot if you want. Yeah. A couple other things. Alright, so one last thing I want to do is I want to show you a mistake I see all too often from Freeware scenery developers. And there's two going on here. One, they've got a library object right on top of a parking space. Now, I do this when I'm editing sceneries as well because I place parking spaces first and then I place static library objects. But I always delete the parking spaces because parking spaces are also where AI park and they are also spawn points. So you don't want to have a library object on there because you don't want to get in a situation where the user spawns in the spot and insta crashes if he's got crash detection turned on. Plus, it looks bad. It's just straight bad scenery design. So if you're going to put a parking space there, don't put a library object in it. Or if you have a library object like ground markings or something, make sure you disable crash detection. Another thing, if you want to have static airplanes parked in the parking area to make it look like the airport's used, then delete the parking spot underneath it. Please. You will make so many people happy if you do. And one other thing, I see this a lot, this little number going on here, where they have parking spots overlaying each other, particularly small ones. What they're trying to get here is they're trying to get those T parking spots that you get at some airports and special events where they have, where is it? It's a library object around here somewhere. Is it in this one? No, it's in the airport objects, isn't it? There's a default one, very low detailed, static planes, which are just a series of static Piper Archers, Cessna 172, Cessna 182, and I believe the Baron and the Mooney, extremely low detailed. They look like crap. But they're there and they're arranged in a T parking spot where you have one airplane facing one way and one airplane facing the opposite way, and they're right next to each other. That way they intermingle nicely. And that's how you can get more planes in a parking area. And that's how you can get more parking spots on a ramp. And some airports do that, except planes don't taxi into those parking spots like they do in Flight Sim. They stop on the taxiway and push back into them. This can lead to problems, though. You can have AI planes, because AI is not the smartest in the world when it comes to where it wants to spawn airplanes. So if you have a citation at this airport, it should spawn over here at the medium parking spot, but it's entirely possible it'll spawn in a small parking spot, and you'll spawn in this one, and next thing and all of a sudden you have a citation's wings stabbing you in the face. It looks good sometimes, but it's just not functional very well, so I don't recommend doing this. Take the creative license and just have these straight pull-in spots like this. They function better, they look better in the sim, and they're less work. They're way less work for you. Also, feel free to delete the lines leading into them and just place what I got here, a white or yellow line to serve as just a big box, and you just park somewhere in that box. Very, very useful. So that's another thing. And I believe that was all I wanted to talk about. I'm sort of at a sudden loss of... I had like a list of things I wanted to say, things to avoid, how not to do it. I've suddenly forgot most of them. You'll pick up most of this as you go. Those just a list of things you can do, and so list of things you can do but shouldn't do, and a few helpful tips from me to you. So that was Country Flyboy, and I think this should be the last video in the Airport Design Editor series, unless I come up with something else, and then that will be the last one. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.